All right, well, let's begin. Good morning. My name is Mike Caldwell. I'm with the Greater Des Moines Partnership, and welcome to our DSM Forward Returning to Work event. This is a part of a series of events the partnership's doing within our DSM Forward initiative, and the goal is to help our local business leaders connect, share, and exchange information and resources related to moving forward into the next phase of reopening. The partnership has published a series of playbooks, FAQs, and other information to help you with this process of moving forward. It's at dsmpartnership.com/dsmforward. So with that, I'd like to move into introductions. Joining us today as our panel is Marta Kadena, Regional Vice President at Wells Fargo, Annette Adams, Associate Vice President of Human Resources Nationwide, and Amy Friedrich, President, U.S. Insurance Solutions Group at Principal Financial Group. Welcome to you all, and thank you for joining us. As a note to our participants, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and mute your microphones and turn off your video to save bandwidth, and open up the chat window. We're going to be using chat as a way to ask questions. It works pretty well. So please go ahead and open up your chat, and as you have questions, feel free to type them in. And I will ask each of our panelists to maybe introduce themselves a little bit and make some opening comments, and then we'll get to the questions. So feel free to start typing as soon as you have one to share. With that, I'm going to start with Marta. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself and maybe just give us a couple minutes on what's going on with your company related to moving back into the office and moving forward.
Absolutely, Mike. Well, good morning, everyone. Marta Kadena. I am the region president for Wells Fargo. I'm based in Des Moines, but I have responsibility primarily for our branches, and for our branches in the Des Moines metro area through Western Iowa, and I also have responsibility for the branches in Minneapolis. So as you might guess, knowing that, again, I'm with Wells Fargo, but I manage the branch network. We've been open this entire time throughout the pandemic, obviously considered an essential business. So at Wells Fargo, out of 260,000 team members throughout the country, about 200,000 are working from home right now. So obviously in our branches, and I'm happy to address this in future questions, we've been operating with what we consider to be, a safe environment. We want to make sure that it's, foremost safe for our team members and our customers. So we've been operating on a limited capacity, I would say full service to the customer, but limited in terms of our delivery in the branches. We operate at about 50% capacity so that we can allow rotation for team members that, may have been exposed or infected. And I can get into that in some of the questions. At this point, in terms of return to work, we do expect that we're going to continue with our current operating model at least until the end of July. And again, we're a national company working with this, and we really can't be super consistent throughout every market because every market and every branch varies. But that's where we step in each day to make sure that our branches can allow for social distancing, if we have drive-ups that are able to be open and not lobbies, and how we operate. Our centers, our big centers, at this point, we anticipate continuing to work from home until at least the end of July, and then we'll start some sort of partial or phased in approach.
All right, thank you very much. Annette, if I could have you go next, that would be great.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Annette Adams. I am the Human Resources Leader for our Des Moines campus for Nationwide Insurance. And, where we are right now, we are just getting started. We've had some mission critical folks in the office this entire time, but we actually are bringing back senior leaders next week here in the Des Moines campus. Some of our other campuses already have folks back, and you might get into some of those local jurisdictions and the differences later, but we are then bringing back a small percentage of our associates later in June. So we're just getting rolling.
All right, well, thank you. And Amy, if you could go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, Amy Friedrich. I'm responsible at Principal for our all of our insurance businesses. And so that is primarily a domestic footprint, although Principal obviously has a global footprint. So I'm going to give you more of a flavor of the Des Moines region, kind of what our response has been, because our headquarters is here, obviously. But also, if there are other questions about other regions, we do have, you know, between 30 and 40 other offices that are at all different stages of opening up. But the biggest news here is that our Des Moines campus, we actually just Monday took our first steps towards reopening. So it was a completely volunteer group. We have about 300 to 400 people who volunteered to come back into the office. We can talk a little bit about the limitations we put on some of the amenities in terms of food service and wellness and those things. So it's a very limited amenity return, but we do have about 300 people in central downtown Des Moines who have returned back to the office just Monday. So I'm happy to share what our experiences have been related to that.
Yeah, in fact, Amy, let's start there. If you could, since you're just right in the thick of it here on Wednesday, how's it going? You know, what's going on and how are people reacting?
Yeah, it's going well. So we have probably about 98% of our global population has been able to work from home. So one of the things we've heard is that, number one, people, you know, miss seeing other people. They miss being able to meet with people. But we do have people who have sporadic, maybe more rural issues with access and Wi-Fi and those types of things. So what I'm really seeing with this first wave back is a lot of people who've had some issues with productivity in terms of managing their Wi-Fi access or broadband access. They're coming back into the office because they're really looking forward to that, you know, kind of consistent access to wireless, making sure they can get everything that they need to get their job done. I'm also hearing that it is, you know, it's still a little odd to have a campus that might badge in 5,500 people in any given day. Even adding 300 or 400 people back into that still feels a little bit strange to folks. So I think people are kind of coming back in slowly. I'm hearing great things in terms of safety. What we're doing is we are doing a screening upon entry. So we're taking a temporal check of temperature. Everyone has filled out the appropriate documentation that is a bit of information about, you know, have you been traveling, certain screening questions. And then each day you badge in, we take that as an attestation that what you have filled in is still accurate and correct. And so the badging in process, the temperature checks have been going really well. We do that as close to the parking facility as we can, so that if people do have an issue with temperature or someone that we want to go ahead and send home, they haven't even made it onto the campus grounds at that point. So we're doing that process. It's working well, and our ability to have good sanitation procedures, you know, wipes and sanitation, appears to be meeting people's expectations. I'm certainly pleased with what I've seen thus far.
Oh, that's great. Annette, let's move to you. You said you've got your senior staff coming in next week. Can you talk a little bit about the preparations you've made? Because you have a pretty good sized campus too here in Des Moines, and a lot of space. Tell us a little bit about the kinds of preparations you're making for those people returning.
Sure. Yeah, we've done a lot of different things. I think first and foremost is the communication that we've been doing with the team. We have a required return to office training that we ask everybody to complete, just to make sure everyone is educated on our expectations for when they return to the office. For example, we are requiring face masks for everybody that comes back. And so we want to make sure everybody understands the requirement that if you are on the move, that you are wearing a face mask. If you are in areas, the lobbies, the elevators, the restrooms, you're wearing a face mask. Just some of those kinds of things. We want to make sure they understand those expectations. From a building prep perspective, we've done a ton with signage, right? So we have signage all over the building from the moment you enter all the way on the different floors. We have signage on the elevators that lets folks know here's the capacity that we are allowing folks. This is how many people can get on an elevator. We actually have X's on the floor, even in the elevators, right, of where to stand so that you can have some social distance between you and other folks. We have changed the occupancy of all of our conference rooms, and we have that occupancy listed on the door of every conference room so folks know, yes, this is a large conference room, but we want no more than X number of people in this particular room. And so we're doing a lot with the signage to help just make things a little bit easier for folks. But from a building perspective, we wanted to make sure, we have our executive group coming back next week. And for the most part, those folks have offices. And so social distancing is a little bit easier. The following week, we are bringing back about 25% of our associates, and kind of like Amy mentioned, strictly voluntary, but we wanted to look at all that desk space and make sure that folks, again, are at least 6 feet apart. And so we worked closely with our corporate real estate team to make sure that we understand where those cubicles are, where folks are, and that we have the distance that we need there. We're also doing a limited cafeteria, for example. We're having limited menu, and all of the cafeteria, all the items you order online, and that's new for us to be able to order online and then just go and pick up your food. I liken it to the rapid pickup from Panera for those of you that have done that, where you can just run down and grab it. I'm actually looking forward to that. I think it's going to be a little more convenient anyway. But it limits that interaction with exchanging of cash and those kinds of things that need to happen. We've also really ramped up our cleaning and sanitation processes within the building. We want to make sure first and foremost that our associates feel safe coming back to the building and that there aren't concerns from that perspective. So, we've increased the hand sanitizer stations across the building. We already had those. We've increased those. We've put in foot pedals right on the bathroom doors. We're doing electrostatic spraying every evening. So just a lot of just above and beyond cleaning of our buildings.
Yeah, it sounds like a really good plan. So just real quick for all of our attendees, and thank you for everybody. We have 57 people on the call today. Please open up the chat window. We'd love to know what your questions are for Marta, for Annette, and for Amy. This is to be interactive, so please take advantage of that. Marta, you have people facing the public every day, coming in as guests because you're a critical resource in these branches. Talk a little bit about what you're doing, especially as it relates to dealing with customer facing.
You bet. Well, Mike, I never thought that after this long in our industry that I would be tracking rolls of toilet paper and bottles of hand sanitizer and wipes every single day, but we do. So really since the middle of March, we work very closely, obviously, with our corporate properties group, and we have to ensure that a branch has all of the necessary equipment. And if you'll recall back to when toilet paper was at a shortage, I mean, we actually had, in some cases, customers taking our toilet paper and hand sanitizer out of branches. So we had to put in a lot of different protocols. So first and foremost, each branch has to have, we have over 5,000 branches in the country. So we have to make sure every branch is equipped with the proper cleaning supplies. In addition, we have cleaning companies that come in 3 times a day. So in all of our branches, they're cleaned 3 times a day. If there is some sort of exposure, if we have a positive case, then there's an additional deep cleaning that transpires. But day to day in our branches, our customers have really done a good job of transitioning to leveraging digital services, which is awesome. It's kind of pushed us into that digital, like, Amy was just saying with, ordering online. I mean, we are able now to do a lot more digitally, but we're in a relationship business and our customers still want to come in and see us. So we have made sure that we have what we call sneeze shields. It's, for every teller line, if you're sitting with a banker at a desk, there will be a sneeze shield in front of you that can be moved around. All of our team members are asked to wear masks as well, or some sort of facial covering. In addition, because we are in a business where we're dealing with cash and we have approvals that have to be done, a supervisor might have to reach over and approve something on a keyboard for that teller, let's say. We have protocols in place to make sure that they're wearing face shields in addition, and that things are wiped down. So all of you on the phone that have had to go to a bank and not online over the last several months probably know, those tubes. We've actually installed some sort of anti-germ tube, but in addition, we make sure that those tubes are wiped down each and every time they go in and out. So the transactions take a little bit longer. So I would say from a productivity standpoint and our modeling, our customers are becoming more patient. I know I am as a consumer that, I may have to wait in line at, Hy-Vee, or may have to, stand further apart. We have X's, on the floor, as Amy had mentioned, lots of signage, which continually gets updated. So we are now at the point where we're doing social distancing inspections, and have to make sure that every single employee understands what to do in certain cases, and their practices are observed. I mean, initially we had some pushback on masks. We're now seeing that that's diminishing. But it's, again, we have to get used to it. And I really believe that from a customer standpoint, we want to make it a safe place. But before we do that, we have to make it a safe place for our employees. So there are a lot of different components that go into it, but making sure they have the supplies, and then making sure the behaviors are right. We have a whole social distancing playbook that gives ideas, separating desks, making sure that we, again, have limits on the number of customers that can enter into a branch. So it's by appointment. And then as we move forward into opening some of our campus buildings, keep in mind they are open right now for our call centers, but we have on-site nursing as well at our campus sites. Nurses are screening for COVID. We have the screening questions and the attestation as well before you come in. But let's say someone becomes symptomatic at work in the campus buildings, we do have on-site nursing that we've added.
That's great. So one of the first questions that came into the group, it's maybe I'm just going to stay with you for a minute, Marta, but I think I'll have all three of you try to address this. How are employees reacting to the new measures you're taking to ensure cleanliness, safety, and social distancing? For example, if they need to wear a mask, how do people feel about that, and how are you enforcing it?
Yeah.
Great question.
Yeah. I think like all of us, there are, we shipped masks to every team member that, was customer facing. There was some pushback initially, and I think all of us will acknowledge too that, when you wear a mask all day long, it gets hot. We've had to address temperature in our branches, so making it cooler as the weather gets hotter. And, we also have to build in more breaks. So understandably, if you're going to be working nonstop, transaction after transaction for 8 hours, you need to have a breather. So we've been able to build in time for them to go into an isolated area or away from other people to wear the mask. We've also allowed them to bring their own. So we have 3 different kinds we've delivered, but I personally find that the disposable masks are more comfortable for me rather than the cloth masks. So they're able to do whichever kind of facial covering that they'd like. And let's just say that there is a health condition where they can't wear a mask and they have to be customer facing, then we go through the accommodations group and they are able to take some sort of short-term leave. And really that's the only way that we do not allow them to be serving customers without a mask.
All right, thank you. Amy, you've gone through the first steps. Tell us a little bit about how that's going for you.
Yeah, and so I do think the roles that we've brought back into the office, and again, I'm in the office here today right now, but the roles that we brought back into the office, a lot of them, I appreciate Marta's focus on kind of those customer facing roles. Ours are going to be a little bit more, let's make sure the office environment, let's make sure our coworkers feel safe, because we're not doing as much of that direct customer contact. What we're really getting though is the first wave of volunteers. I would say as long as your communication was really clear about what you'll be facing, they knew that if you're in common areas, if you're in areas where you can't maintain a social distance of 6 feet, if you're riding elevators together, you're going to have to wear masks. And I'll be honest, I think a few people selected out of this first wave back because they want to see how, the science emerges a little bit more in terms of mask wearing, how their comfort level emerges. I think people are even trying to figure out what masks are more comfortable for them to wear for longer periods of time, as Marta was talking about. So I think what we have found is that generally our employee population, as long as we're clear and give them choices, and again, Mike, one of the questions I'm watching them scroll by too was, when is this not going to be voluntary? So I think as long as this is really voluntary, people can kind of check their own comfort level. And if they've been able to be productive, which again, the vast majority of the roles have been able to be productive, then they're going to be in the driver's seat on when they come back, kind of how they re-enter, how quickly they do that. Now, there are probably going to be at certain roles. I think what people are saying is there going to be a date that you set up that you say, as of this date, everybody has to come back in. Probably our approach is much more a role-based approach. There are some roles that really make sense for them to at least be able to be with their teams part of the time, that have to be locally or on site in terms of their ability to monitor. So it's more of a role by role decision. I do think we're going to end up over the long term with people getting comfortable with what I would call kind of a hybrid footprint. So doing more time than they used to working from home, but also having a portion of their day and accountabilities or week or month be in office as well. So my guess is we'll see a lot of hybrid roles. And I think people's acceptance of, social distancing and clean up after yourself and do those things has been really good, but I want to acknowledge it's completely voluntary at this point. So I think we'll hit an inflection point at some point, but I sense that it's pretty manageable.
All right. Annette, maybe you can talk a little bit. I know you don't have as many people quite back in yet, but how are people reacting so far to what you've communicated?
We haven't had folks back in Des Moines, but we have in our other locations. And so, so far, so good. I think, the face masks are just, again, one of those things to get used to, especially for those folks that don't feel like they need to wear them outside of the workplace, even though we've made that a rule for us. It's the friendly reminders and nudges for folks to get them on. I did see a question about, what are you going to do? I can't remember what the question was about if folks don't comply, right? And we actually did come up with kind of a disciplinary framework that if we have to go there, with multiple reminders and things for folks to stay safe and keep our other associates safe, we will do that. And so that is something we have created, and we have it ready to go if we need it. I think right now, the folks especially, we're like Amy mentioned, the folks that are coming back in our other locations and coming back here in Des Moines at this point are going to be strictly voluntary. So, they, raise their hand, they're ready to come back for whatever reason. And I think you find that they're also willing to follow the rules to go with that. Once we get further into the waves, we'll see how that associate base will react.
And that there was one other question, I think specifically for you, asking to elaborate on the electrostatic spraying. I think it was you that mentioned.
Oh boy! Right after I said that, I'm like, I shouldn't have said that because I don't know if I can say it very well. I will give you the version for dummies. My understanding, right, is that with your typical cleaning, right, when you use dry cleaning, you're essentially spreading dust and germs and things around, and even with some of the wet cleaning. You can do the same. So with electrostatic cleaning, there's actually a science behind it. It's releasing a mist into the air that essentially has an atom in it that will attach to surfaces, attach to the air, do things to be able to essentially provide a high level of sanitation. It's what you might see in hospitals and different things like that. And so that is what we are using. And that is a scaled down. I'm sure it's a lot more detailed for the scientists out there and the folks that actually deal with this day in and day out. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an explanation.
Sure. Amy, I want to go back to you. There's a question here about office space and future layout of office space, amount of square footage, layout of office space, continuation. I know that Principal opened up when they remodeled one of the buildings recently. Things are very open plan, and there was a lot of community spaces, and especially for you, I'm wondering, has that changed and what's going on with that?
Yeah, so we are taking that question a fair bit in terms of, because our kind of redesign of the corporate campus has really included a lot of neighborhoods and kind of common areas as opposed to dedicated seating areas. And again, there's a whole culture and series of questions behind, how does that work and does everyone love that? But right now, as we're looking through the waves coming back in, we're very comfortable with people kind of carving out their space and kind of saying, I think I'm going to sit here and I'm going to come back and sit here every day. So we've been trying to be very clear about what areas are not open and what areas are open. So for the areas that are open, we're encouraging people to come back kind of to that same section or same space, and then to do, what would be normal protocols of wiping down and doing things. And then of course we're doing, the cleaning protocols at an enhanced level. The thing I would talk about long term is I do think, although sort of neighborhoods and community space right now is a little bit awkward in terms of making sure that people feel really safe, that they're coming back to kind of the same area every day and it's really clean. I do think as we look at some of the surveying we're doing of our employee population, and there's a lot more of what I would call this sort of hybrid preference emerging, a little bit work from home, a little bit come to the office. I think we're really going to like having the flexibility, the flex that can move, so that if we end up being able to have more people who aren't necessarily on a day-to-day basis choosing to always come downtown, but can do some work remotely, I think we're really gonna like the neighborhood space so that we can flex in and flex out of areas, and we're not just, one spot, one landing spot that is unoccupied 40% of the time. So I think we're gonna like how that works. Right now, there are some basic questions about, wait, if I come back and I just want to go to this one space, can I go back there all the time? And so we're being as flexible as we can to say, yep, if you just want to come back and land in that one spot all the time, go ahead and do that if you feel like it's going to be better for safety and sanitation purposes.
Right. Marta, I'm curious, when it comes to space allocation, layout, branches are kind of a complex space because you have backroom space, you have office space, you have the lobby space and the teller lines. What's this doing to your thinking longer term, you and your team members, on how to lay out a branch?
Yeah, interestingly, I've had some conversations recently because we have a de novo branch that we're looking at in Minneapolis. And those are the questions, right? We're saying, okay, how does, our spaces typically in our new designs have been pretty tight. So our architects are now having to adjust for this. And, we don't believe, again, we're planning long-term. So let's just say, we normally would have, let's say, 3 tellers in a drive-up space that's pretty compact. We're needing to now say, okay, we can only have 2. The desks have to be further apart. Customer waiting areas have to be further apart. So it definitely adds a different level of thought and strategic, thinking now to how they're going to change. So I haven't seen the redesign back, but those are questions that we're asking. And even in our existing structures, we're having to make a lot of changes. So we had started kind of down the path that, Amy had mentioned around, tighter spaces, shared cubes, all that was fine and good, lower walls. Now we're coming back to high walls, spread apart. So there's some things that we can do currently. But as we look at new branches, which, we won't do many of those, but we're having to, our designers are really having to look at social distancing now as a permanent, as a permanent issue. So a lot of, in our corporate spaces and our centers, we're definitely moving cubes apart, which means less people, less productivity, more shifts perhaps. So we're having to adapt for all of that. Needing to get creative.
Yeah, exactly. So Annette, what about you? I'm thinking about some of the call center activity. I believe it's call center here in Des Moines that I can see quite a few people through your front windows. It's a beautiful facility. What has this changed?
Yeah, same thing. Right now, again, we're fortunate we have the space that we can distance folks and move cubicles and make sure people are spread apart. But I think some of the other things too that we're looking at too is the whole getting creative. We have what we call a future of workspace that we are piloting in some of our buildings right now, where it does allow more flexibility for that hybrid working model. I think that Amy, you mentioned, where maybe you do have people that are flexing, right? They're in the office a few days a week, they're working from home a few days a week. And with this new kind of cubicle setup, essentially they would have a locker of sorts. They come in, they get their mouse, their keyboard, their notebook, and they go sit down at an open space in this new area. Obviously there'd be disinfecting and those kinds of things, but you essentially wouldn't have assigned cubes for those folks that are not in the office every day, all day, all week long. And so we're trying to get creative and try some of those out. Now the associates that have been trying those out really enjoy that setup and that model, and it gives them that flexibility to come in when they need to. If they have a meeting or have something that they want to be in the office for. So again, trying to get creative that way. But with our existing space, we're fortunate that we can still make things work from a social distancing perspective.
Marta, I'm going to return to you for a minute. And this question I would ask all of you to answer, but what surprises have you encountered so far as people are re-entering?
Yeah, boy, it's a surprise every minute. It, Gosh, what's my biggest one? Probably we have been very generous in terms of our benefits, and if you're exposed, you just say it, no documentation, you go quarantine for 14 days. So I think one of my surprises, and again, you really see sometimes people's true colors coming out a little bit, where gee, I was exposed, I stayed home for 2 weeks with pay, and now this week I went to a family reunion, and I think I got exposed again, so I'm gone again. So I think understanding how we balance that benefit and safety of our team members with maybe some of the decisions we're going to have to make to make it fair for all of our team members. So we've been extremely generous, and if you were at risk in any of the CDC at-risk categories, up until the end of this month, you get to stay home if you can't work from home. So I think those are some of the surprises I'm seeing. Wow, it's just hard to come up with a one size fits all, but to see some of the reactions, sometimes some people will be there every single day, and then others are. We've got to balance how far we take that.
Sure. Amy, what about you? What has surprised you?
Can you guys hear me? I actually dropped off just very quickly, and I'm back.
Oh no, we can hear you just fine. Yes.
Good. I think the only thing that's been surprising for me is that the comfort level for people. I think people's views about what is the role of testing, where should the company take over versus, what they're kind of doing. There's some people who are literally like, you know what, I'm here. I'm not worried about this at all. I want to come in. I want to go back to normal. I want to do my work. And there's another category of people who are absolutely like, until I have a vaccine or a clear antibody test, along with daily testing for active virus, I don't want to have any part of it. So I think what's been most surprising for me is that the diversity of people's thoughts around what safety means, what responsibility means. And so we're having a lot of really interesting discussions. And from a diversity standpoint, it's kind of an interesting layer that I hadn't thought of before. So I think the surprising thing for me is just sort of the strongly held beliefs at different ends of the continuum. And then it's really finding that space that, we're comfortable, that we've managed, health and safety and security, and we've balanced that with what our customers really need from us. And so that's been probably the most interesting sort of macro thing I have seen since we've started entering back.
And that, what are you seeing and hearing from your other locations when it comes to surprises?
Not a lot of surprises. I think kind of along the lines of even Amy, what you were saying is there are so many people in just such different places with this whole topic, right? There's so many resources. It's hard to know what to believe, what you're seeing on social media, what you're hearing in the news. And so with that, you have folks that have zero anxiety and they're ready to come back and they're ready to be back. And then you have the other end of the spectrum where you have emotional wellness issues, right? Where we're trying to get those folks the assistance and support even that they need to get them comfortable. And I think that's one of the big things is, gosh, we've been working from home this whole time and it's been going really well. So why do we need to even start the return to work and come back to the office? Why is that even a thing? Can't we continue to work from home? And so there's some of those pieces that we are trying to do to help associates understand that we are taking their, safety is our number one priority and it's of the utmost importance, and that we are following all the guidelines and even going above and beyond some of those expectations to help associates get comfortable. I do think that's where some of the waves, right, as you bring folks back are helpful, right? So again, voluntary folks coming back here in the first couple of waves. And for those folks that do have a medical concern or a family member with a concern or whatever it might be that just don't feel comfortable coming back yet, right? We can work individually with those associates to figure out the right timing for them to come back if they come back at all.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. On that, staying with you for a minute, long-term changes. I mean, a couple areas I'd like to hear each of you, but two things that come to mind. One is cleaning and the workspace, which we've talked about some, but really looking out long-term now, what are your companies talking about? And two, work from home. I mean, do you see, we also at the partnership have seen excellent productivity working from home. And I'm curious if your companies are already talking about long-term work from home. I've heard the word hybrid from several of you, but maybe you could just address that. And I'm sure you're being asked today, can I work from home permanently? Do I have to work from home? We've heard both.
Yeah. I think we've recognized there's synergies, there's things that happen in the office that are just the productivity pieces that come with that we appreciate and that we want to maintain. And that's why coming back is important. But we've also realized that COVID has made us, forced those folks to get comfortable with the remote work environment, right? And we've tested it out now for a few months. And for the most part, we have found a highly, highly productive work environment. You wouldn't see a blip on the map of where, productivity maybe suffered. But we do have certain groups of associates and certain roles that we've recognized would be better off in the office. And so that is something we need to balance is, what the associate desires to do, but also balance that with the business needs and try to make sure we come to a resolution that makes sense for both of those things. And we are also trying to allow our leaders to determine what's best for the groups that they lead, right? And so if you have a leader that's comfortable with a hybrid model of allowing that flexibility with folks to come in the office part of the week and work from home part of the week, or even permanent work from home from this point, we're trying to work with those leaders to allow that to happen where it makes business sense.
It's going to get complex. I used to lead part of a large organization, and when you change a leader, and so the leader A was lots of flexibility. Leader B takes that role over and says, no, I want everybody in the office. We saw that with Yahoo. Marta, I'm going to switch to you on that one. You guys have a very large organization. I mean, I don't know how many employees you have, but I know it's a lot. How do you look at that long term?
Yeah, I would say also it's very much in motion. We have a lot of unanswered questions because we are continuing to figure it out every day. So it's okay to say, I don't know, and raise the issue. I would say one thing that we've really learned that we have to continue moving forward is just continued excessive communication. And that's been crucial. So, we have daily COVID calls that anyone can dial into, any manager. We have 260,000 employees. So any manager can dial in and say, I'm having this issue, how do I deal with it? So making sure that we're dealing with things consistently is really important. And I'm assuming we'll land in some sort of hybrid approach too with a lot of our lines of business, because again, it really works for some people. We've even been able to figure out how to have, customer contact, phone contact center team members be able to work from home and, deliver, equipment to them to be able to do it. So I would say that we'll continue with, again, not a full workforce in the spaces at one time, but some sort of shifts and some sort of, again, hybrid, which I think all of us have mentioned, but it's really going to vary. You mentioned cleanings. I think one thing that I've learned is that our employees need to see that. They don't just trust that it happened last night. They need to see that it's happening. So as much as, you can do that. And again, we have, cleanings that take place at night, but they also come in during the day. And again, that's because we have customer flow, we've got people touching things. So we learned that they need to be able to see it. And if they saw someone that was cleaning that, used the same rag over and over, that was escalated. So we've really had to learn a lot about, how our team members are reacting and feeling to all of these changes. So again, is it going to be the same? Parts of our country have already opened up and, we're the only ones that don't have the lobby open in some cases. So we're feeling pressure sometimes from the communities to reopen, but we've really taken a step back, and we really want to make sure that we're, uber safe. And a lot of it has to do, like Annette said, with how your team members are feeling. So if they don't feel safe, being there, then we have to be able to allow for that and then adjust.
Amy, what about you? Oh, it is. You're absolutely
one
right.
of the things that's been interesting is, and again, there's different people who have different interest in this, but before, you didn't think about your airflow much.
Mm-hmm.
You knew if you were hot or you were cold. Well, with a fairly interesting set of evidence that air circulation patterns can carry kind of viral loads differently, there's a lot more people who want to understand how much fresh air are we bringing in, how are we moving that through the buildings, and so the other thing we're finding is that we've got to make sure we've got those answers ready, that and I know one of the things that we have done is made sure that that we're comfortable with the airflow that we've brought in, that we're increasing the fresh airflow where we can, that we're increasing circulation where we can and where it makes sense, particularly in common areas. So there's a whole different set of things that that people want to know about now, and it's completely legitimate that they have questions about that. And so I would say the other thing is, long term, we're going to have to make sure we understand what we're doing, with cleaning, what we're doing with, disposal, what we're doing with the frequency of use or reuse of certain things around the office, what we're doing with airflow. And we're just going to have to be able to address that on a more regular basis than we have talked about historically.
Amy, I'm going to stick with you for a minute. You have facilities all over the world, and I know you have a very large number of employees in India. And I'm thinking about travel, and I'm curious how you see long-term. I know I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but long-term, when we think about travel outside the United States, I used to travel heavily internationally. And we're all now hyper aware of what that means with the way the virus spread in the first place. And now when we see different countries having second waves, or whatever we want to call them, how does your company look at travel, especially internationally, with employee to employee, not just customer, but team members?
Yeah. So, I think I'm going to lean back on that. Man, this is evolving. One of the things you've noted is that we do have a very healthy employee population in India. And we had, for a series of years, pretty strict protocols just in terms of security of information, information security protocols, that we had fairly limited use and access of work from home. And that team has done an amazing job sort of balancing security and balancing the safety of the employees that we have there. And we have moved primarily to work from home right now. And so for right now, it's not as much of an issue because many of our employees in India are still kind of sheltering in place. They're still at home largely doing their work. Even as some of those orders begin to lift at a national level, they are still primarily working from home. So I think the question that we're going to run into is with so much productivity, with the virtual tools that we have now and people's comfort level, like 10 times higher than it used to be with using those virtual tools, how much do we have to go on site? And where's the balance of that risk? My guess is we will be doing a little less international travel. Certainly when it's, within the company, intra-company travel, we might be doing a little less of that for a pretty extended period of time. I don't want to act like that's going to mean that we change our commitment to how we communicate and how we engage. But I think what we're finding is we can communicate and engage pretty darn effectively and do it remotely. So we're asking those questions right now, and I think our global travel policy is just going to have to keep evolving. We learn a lot from watching, Hong Kong and Southeast Asia and other communities. We actually learned a lot on how they responded to SARS, and that's been helpful in us understanding some of the protocols that we might, kind of early on needed to get on top of. And so I would see our global footprint as very helpful in terms of helping us understand sometimes what's possible from other areas, and honestly, it gave us a leg up in terms of understanding what we might truly be facing.
That makes sense. So Marta, I'm curious, I know a lot of your people are in customer facing areas, but we've all talked about the hybrid approach. For those of your employees that could be hybrid approach, and I've heard this question several times in other sessions, is the company looking at the issue of, well, do we have to provide, chairs, desks, computers, keyboards, monitors at home too? How do we deal with that? Interesting idea. What happens long term with hybrid? What are the issues? Because I know you don't have the answers, and I'm not looking for the answers, but what kind of issues do you see long term hybrid model?
Well, what I can tell you is we have found a way to deliver that equipment, and I'm not just talking about a laptop or me. I've always been able to work remotely. But for team members that haven't had that, let's just say, I'll give you an example. We've had some team members in customer facing roles that have been out because they're high risk or they're caring for someone who's high risk. So we've been able to, what we call workforce share, redeploy them into some of these work at home positions, which have been amazing. So they're still able to contribute. And they've delivered, they've delivered full equipment to them, as long as they have a space that is considered quiet, and as long as they've got Wi-Fi and high speed. So there's some qualifications, but we've been able to do that. So I would see that we're going to be able to do that more and more. So our technology group has figured it out because they had to. In fact, when India put their shelter-in-place order in, I think as that center closed, a lot of that work got redeployed to even some tellers in the United States that were at home, high risk, but yet they delivered equipment to them. Now they've been able to figure that out in India as well. So I think the company's ability to deliver the equipment for technology has now been tested, and I think we'll continue that. So I could easily see, work 3 days in the office, work 3 days or whatever, some sort of hybrid approach as we look at social distancing needs.
Well, I think we're coming to the close here. We haven't had a lot more new questions come in. I'd like to give each of you an opportunity just to give any closing thoughts you have for, again, for these people that are out there, especially, you're all pretty good sized businesses and have a lot of support. And you think about the person running a smaller business with 10, 20, 30 employees. And Marta, we can just stick with you since you're up on the screen right now. Any final thoughts as we wrap this up today?
I think, as I mentioned, communication, really knowing where your team members are at. And I know Amy mentioned diversity, and this is a great time to really have those conversations. You just don't know what a team member has going on at home or what fears they might have. So, and also we don't want to risk disengagement, when they're not with another group. So, or they might be reassigned to a different group. So I'd say communication and making sure your team still feels connected. And in light of a lot of things going on in our world today. So not just COVID, but when we're investing a lot in working remotely and how to lead remotely right now. And it is a very different skill set than our team members have been used to. So communicate, wrap your arms around them virtually, and make sure they're comfortable.
Thank you. Annette, what about you? Any parting thoughts that you might have?
Yeah, I guess a few things. We talked a lot about communication, and I do think that's been key, especially being a larger organization. We have had weekly video calls with our CEO and our executive team where they are staying in front of our associate base. We have local leaders staying in front of associates as well, just to help them. It's been such a rapid moving and changing thing that we've all had to stay in front of. And so the more communication we found, the better. And yes, something we said last week might have changed this week, and we have to be fluid, and we have to be able to pivot. And I think associates have learned that pretty quickly. So I think that's been one of them. Education has been another. The whys behind why we want you to wear a face mask, the whys behind what we're doing, and why we're doing it, I think is important and helps to get some of that buy-in as well. The other things too is we talked about cleaning before. Yeah, we've always done this just thorough job cleaning, but now we feel the need to communicate that. Here's how we're cleaning. Here's what we're doing. So don't assume folks, just know that we're saying we're taking safety precautions, but what does that mean? I think the other thing is make sure from a building readiness perspective, you're ready to bring your associates back. Can you keep the distance that you need from folks? Do they feel safe? Do you need to install different things or, you know, reconfigure cubicles? That building readiness piece, I think, is important. And the other thing too is just, we can't forget is just what's your process for reporting? You know, so positive, you know, reporting for you or a family member. How do you go about doing that so that you can take the proper, you know, contact tracing or whatever it is you need to protect the rest of your population? You know, nationwide, we're fortunate. We have a fantastic associate health services team, and they lead all the mitigation for that. So, you know, be thinking about if you don't have those resources, how might you do it? So those are some things I would leave you with.
Thank you. Amy, I'll wrap up with you.
Yeah, I think Marta and Annette have done a great job kind of getting at that point about, you know, you just want to find that balance between where people can be comfortable and feel really productive. The thing I would say too is I do feel like, and I'll speak specifically for Principal, I do feel like we have a responsibility to share things with like small businesses or businesses that are just more of in the growth phase. So when I think about the things that we're, you know, learning through our own, you know, we have the luxury of having a function that's a legal function that looks through all the legislation and kind of makes sense of it. So the materials that we've been trying to put out there to make available, you know, here's what the CARES Act can mean. Here's what it can mean for small businesses. Here's what the PPP program means, and here's what forgiveness looks like. We're also trying to share, here's what return to work looks like for us. So to the extent that it helps small businesses sort of imagine what's possible or know what to avoid, we're trying to get that information out there so that any learnings that we have as a company, you know, that has a global footprint but still cares really deeply about that small business experience, we're trying to bring that back out so that that becomes sort of a window to the world if small business owners can be helped by that. So I just wanted to make sure that I mentioned that we feel a responsibility to share what we have, and if it's useful, we want it to be, you know, use it.
That's wonderful. I think I'll reach out to you specifically after the fact and find out where we can find some of that information.
Great.
All right. Well, I want to thank you, Marta, Annette, and Amy, all three of you, for your participation today. A lot of really interesting information. And I love the comment about the diversity. You know, we're all having to renew our focus on diversity. And you're absolutely right. The diversity of how people feel about this is as wide a diverse span as any I've ever seen. And I think we all have to just really respect that. So with that, I want to thank everyone. Again, take a look at the partnership website, dsmpartnership.com/DSM forward for resources. We will have a recording of this posted up on our website here in the next day or two. And with that, I'll go ahead and end the call.